tell you, a year ago, I never in a million years would have guessed that I'd be standing here on this stage today talking about being interesting, because my marketing career had flatlined. I thought, if I have to write another brochure about features and benefits, my head is going to explode. My creative juices had stopped flowing. I needed a change. I liked SAP a lot, thought they're doing great things here. I just need to find a different role where I can express myself, do cooler things. So I looked at the jobs, what's available. I found an interesting posting for customer experience marketing. Took a read through the job description. There was a little bit of HR speak going on there, so I had to do some translating. But I was seeing things that looked unfamiliar. Storytelling, collaboration with journalists, communications, digital content supply chain. This was all a little bit foreign for me, so I sent the job description along to some of my marketing colleagues. And I said, is this typically what a field marketing manager role looks like? And they said, no. This is really odd. I think you should move on, apply to a different job. But I was intrigued, so I went ahead and applied, and a few weeks later, I sat down with this guy, Jim, and he told me all about the Office of Being Interesting. And we've been having fun ever since. So today, we're going to talk about change, big change. And we're going to have a lot of fun talking about it. So give it off to Jim. Thank you.
Thanks, Celia. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed Celia's tweet that's been spinning up here saying, PowerPoint's dead, long live Prezi, or whatever. And now we launch right into a PowerPoint presentation.
We're hypocrites.
So don't believe anything we tell you in this session, I guess is that message. So yeah, I was guilty of writing that job description, and I was guilty of coining this funny name of Welcome to the Office of Being Interesting. But the reason I did it is because how we need to do marketing is changing. I mean, we've been talking about it for the last 2 days. How we need to engage with customers is changing. How we need to represent the brand and kind of let go of the brand as well and let the market kind of own our brand and the conversation with it. And that's not really natural for a lot of people, particularly in our business, the software business, the high-tech industry, where we're very used to explaining to people what we're really good at doing for them, what our software does, how we can help them solve specific problems with specific sets of technology. And people don't want to hear that anymore. If we had a slide up there that just went backwards, but you know, it's been pretty well documented lately that people want to engage at the time and in the ways that they want to engage. And so in the past, a vendor could kind of manage the relationship with its customers, manage the sales cycles, particularly at in the enterprise space, right, where we would actually teach our customers how to buy our solutions. So we were very much in control of the buying cycle. And now you hear everyone talks about the buyer's journey and the fact that there's so much information and expertise available, and through social networks, people get all kinds of information from their peers. We don't own that conversation anymore. And typically, when somebody does engage with a vendor, they've already done all the research that's kind of led them to a point of view. And maybe they actually don't engage with you because of that. You've missed the opportunity because you haven't been participating in the conversations that they've been having and in the places that they've been going to make themselves, you know, more intelligent about the decisions that they're looking to make. So the problem is a lot of us, we're guilty as well. We're still doing marketing the way we did it back in the 1990s, right? If you look at, we have a thing we call Email Tuesday. So our outbound guys have determined that Tuesday is the best day to send out emails. And you guys probably have a similar thing, right? Because Monday everyone's overloaded, and then during the week they're busy, so you get them on Tuesday. And predictably at 10 o'clock every morning on Tuesday, my email starts to fill up with messages from SAP. And so, some days it's like 40 or 50 outbound emails that we're sending to our customers. Now granted, we're segregating lists and not everyone's seeing 50 emails, but I look at that and, you know, if my hair hasn't turned white already. Every Tuesday it gets a little bit wider. So we looked at the Office of Being Interesting as a way to kind of drag people out of that model and into looking at what are the new ways that we can be having these conversations with our customers. How do we move away from just talking about products and features and functions, which we're really good at, I admit that. And how do we go higher in the funnel, if you want to think about the funnel, and even actually get outside the funnel and participate in those conversations that are happening in authentic ways, so that when people start to think about who they may want to engage with as a partner to help them solve a problem, we've already been present and we've already helped to kind of set the conversation and bring a point of view to the table. So what does that mean in terms of where marketing is going? Celia has created this persona called Milton Millennial, and I just want to do a show of hands. Who here was born after the year 1980, which is about the cutoff for millennials, right? So people always talk about millennials in the workplace and the influence that millennials are having on how work gets done, and they're spoiled and they have expectations, and we've all heard the whole millennial in the workplace conversation. But what they're really doing, more importantly, is they're changing how business works, and they're changing the expectations of what that brand engagement and interaction is. And so particularly in the B2B world, they're bringing expectations of a consumer experience into the B2B world. So the tools that they use at work need to feel like consumer tools. The way that they engage with potential vendors, partners, and other types of entities needs to feel like what they do with their friends in social networks. And so that's really an opportunity and a challenge for us to look at how we do marketing and how we come to the table in new and interesting ways. So that means there's a lot of junk we have to leave behind, right? SAP is a very sustainable company, and we're a leader in sustainability, and we support recycling, and we have Nissan Leafs charging stations at our offices and so forth. But there's a lot of junk that we just need to leave behind, and it's tough for people to understand that. We were talking last night about the lady from Comcast and the challenge with getting people on the phone. I mean, our go-to tactic, let's face it, has been we do events, we do emails, and we do tele. And that's like 80% of everybody's marketing mix. And nobody reads emails anymore, and people are stopping picking up the phone. So how do we replace that with new marketing approaches and tactics that will appeal to not just the traditional decision makers, but the emerging decision makers who are driving the kind of millennial revolution? So that's how we came to thinking about, all right, let's think of ourselves as the Office of Being Interesting, which is kind of a pretentious title, I admit that, and I never meant to be on stage talking about that. It was kind of an internal branding, but here we are. So what we're challenging ourselves to do and challenging our people to think about is stop being an advertiser and start being a publisher, right? Stop trying to influence people with an overt point of view about why you're the best at whatever, and understand what they're talking about, understand where they're going for information, understand how they're engaging in peer networks, how they find information, and get yourself there. Be part of that. And that means a lot of letting go, right? You have to put a lot of stuff in the junkyard because we need to innovate new ways to validate that kind of engagement with our markets and our customers and our prospects. And so the headline is, instead of the banner ad, be the feature story, right? And this is content marketing. People have a lot of different definitions of what content marketing is, and we do even among our own marketing organization. But it's really about bringing to the table stuff that people care about and want to read or want to interact with. And it's about being interesting. And I keep coming back, two words I keep coming back to are conversations and interesting. And those are the bars I think we have to set for ourselves in this world, that if we truly are going to shift a lot of what we've done traditionally into more of a content marketing, social engagement type model, we have to do that authentically and be honest about how our voice resonates in those places. Because it's got to be a different voice than what we've had in the past. So I went back and forth with Celia on this one, and she left it in, so that's okay. This is Milton in 2020, but this is actually Milton today, right? This is how we need to do marketing to people like Milton, who, you know, today might be somebody who is just climbing the career path, but a few years from now is going to be the person making the decisions on do we get in the door or not. And a lot of that decision that Milton makes will be based on his experience with us and our brand, you know, in the intervening years. And so we need to look at how do we deliver the right kind of content to the right people at the right time. Right? We say that all the time as marketers. It's harder to do, easier to say than it is to do. And one of the emerging models that I frankly kind of stumbled upon it when I started talking about the Office of Being Interesting, is really like a brand newsroom model. And so when I looked at, Celia and I are two people, right? And we can create content, we can create blogs, we can be part of the conversation ourselves, but that's not sufficient, right? We need to look at how do we tap the creative power and the information power of the entire organization. We have 80,000 people work for SAP around the world. By the way, only 20% are in Germany, so we're not a big German ERP company anymore. Less than half of our revenue comes from ERP, probably about 40%. And as I said, 80% of our people are in places like Palo Alto and Bangalore and Shanghai and Korea and Singapore and so forth. Anyway, that's a divergence. So we looked at there's a lot of interesting and smart people in every organization, right? And the lady from E&Y earlier today was touching on that. That's an largely untapped pool of knowledge, information, creativity. We have these people we call industry principals. They work with our salespeople, go in, and they essentially make us look smart in front of the customer because they have very deep experience in a particular industry. These guys know, they've forgotten more than we'll ever learn about certain industry topics. And yet, their only outlet for that intelligence has typically been sitting across the table from a customer in a sales cycle. So that's like a population that we identified. How do we tap into that, and how do we extract that interesting knowledge and content from their brains and put it into the right channels? And typically you would say, okay, go write a blog. Well, who has time on a consistent basis to write a blog if it's not their day job, right? So what we've looked at in the brand newsroom, and Celia will take you guys through it, is how do you build that capability to unlock some of those content streams in ways that you can provide kind of a frictionless path forward, where if I'm an industry principal, I don't need to know how to write, how to get my stuff into the right channels, right? Understand how to do content syndication and amplification, right? We can do all of that for them if we provide the capacity. So we're looking at how do we connect the potential demand, which is all not potential demand. We have many, many channels into which we can put content, and they never have enough content. And then on the supply side, we have all these smart people from whom we can extract interesting content and put into those channels. So that's what Celia is going to take us through in a second. And the key to this is, and I've talked a little bit about it already, is you really, and the word to focus on here, I think, is authentic. People can tell when you're kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing participating in these conversations, right? And you need to have a persistence over time where people start to trust what you're saying and start to believe that you are someone from whom they can take advice and become smarter. Because at the end of the day, the best way to sell is to make the person that you're selling to feel like you're helping them get smarter and better at what they do, at a personal level, not just at a professional level. So I think authenticity is a huge and a very high bar we need to set when we say we're going to get into doing content marketing. And so this is where it's fun, but it's also hard. And it's a cultural shift that we need to drag our people through to get them to think this way. We often sit down with subject matter experts or senior executives, people who should have a strong point of view and a voice that we want to bring into the market. And it's amazing, even with very senior level people, how hard it is to get them to talk about stuff other than the product that they want to sell you, right? So instead of talking to one of our HR, instead of having one of our HR executives talk about why we have such a great HCM solution, we need them to talk about the future of work or new models of collaboration, right? Or millennials in the workforce, and have that be what drives the conversation that ultimately may lead to a sales cycle, right? Hopefully will. And so it's to build content that matters and that's authentic is actually a lot harder than it seems because of that cultural shift that we need to make. And it's the same with our customers too, right? The best storytelling comes from your customers. But they're so used to us coming to them, asking them to tell our story, that often they just shut down. They're like, all right, I'm tired of being a reference for you. I do it all the time, right? What we're trying to do with some of the initiatives we have going now is to turn that on its head and say, hey, we have space in Forbes every week. We'd like you to write a guest blog about your near-death experience where your company almost went under and you saved it and what you did to save it. We have a couple of customers that are writing those kind of things for us. And even for them, it takes a while to understand, okay, so you don't need me to say SAP is great and your software is the best thing. And no, we're giving them a platform to tell their story. And by extension, people know it's our customer, right? And so building content that works is hard and requires a cultural shift, but it's where we need to go. And we really need to look at, when we look at our people, right, our marketing organization is full of, and I say this with all due respect, software engineers and MBAs, and many of them are not like, they don't fit that publisher profile. They don't really understand this model yet. And so we need to give them examples of how to do that. And in some cases, move them into roles where we don't need them to do this if they're not good at it. And so it's an interesting cultural shift that we're trying to drive here with some of the change management that we're doing. And at the end of the day, I mean, this is what we try and do. We try and tell great stories and use that as a way to get people to engage. And so a couple of examples of that are we have a customer in South Africa called Standard Bank. And if you think Africa is a very interesting place these days, because what had been holding them back traditionally for years, other than a lot of institutional challenges and political challenges, was the lack of traditional infrastructure, right? Electricity, phone lines, all the things that we built out in the first part of the 20th century. Now they're a hot growth market because they've leaped over all that and everything's on the mobile device. And so what Standard Bank was able to do is look at how can they call it banking the unbanked, right? How do you ever get out of poverty? How do you ever get an improved station in life if you're not engaged in the financial system to some degree, right? So they work with us to build out a vision of how to bring banking to the unbanked. And basically now they have people all over Africa who had never had a bank account before, never had a checking account. You know, whatever money they had was kind of tucked under their mattresses. they now are able to do a fully fledged banking transactions on their mobile device, and that's helping to lift these guys out of poverty, right? So those are the stories that we're trying to tell, as opposed to, our technology does this or that. And so now Celia's going to take you through the journey that we're in the middle of in trying to move toward this Office of Being Interesting vision, and some of the learnings that we've had along the way.
Thanks, Jim. So here we are. We want to build this brand newsroom, but how? This is new, and new is often scary, and new is always hard. So how do we go about this process? We're going to walk through 5 steps to building out the brand newsroom. And keep in mind that this is a journey. So Jim and I don't claim to be experts yet, but we hope to be soon. We're making great progress and great strides in building out a brand newsroom at SAP, but it's not without its challenges.
I like to say we try and be 1 page ahead in the teacher's manual.
Okay, so we looked at our landscape. We sit in the North America regional marketing team. So on one side of us, we have our field. We have our field marketing managers. As Jim described earlier, we have industry experts. And of course, we have our sales force. On the other side, we have these folks that are doing great things with content marketing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the SAP Business Innovation blog, but it's definitely considered a best practice in the industry. It's been very successful. They have a ton of content that they're publishing, something like 20 to 25 blogs daily. But if you look at who's writing those blogs, I'd say 90% of it's probably by marketing people, which is great because on one hand, these folks are great storytellers. They're talented writers. They understand an editorial or journalistic point of view. But from my standpoint, sitting in North America, I see that there's potential for so many more great stories to come out of our region. Our customers have really interesting stories to tell. Our industry experts, they live that life. They walked in our customer's shoe, and they're out there every day working with our customers, hand in hand, serving as a trusted advisor. And those are stories that we as marketing need to take to market the right way. But as Jim alluded to earlier, those folks are busy, and they're not necessarily motivated or have the resources to write blogs on a daily basis, especially not 25 of them. So what do? We created a program called Story Hunters, and we wanted a fun name. If it makes you think of a reality TV show, that's exactly where we were headed. We're kind of rebels with a cause. We wanted to cause a bit of positive disruption within the organization to say, look at us, we're doing something different, because there's a lot of sameness that's going on, a lot of expectations from the field, from the customers, that if SAP knocks on their door and says, I want to do a blog, I want to write a story, it's 100% going to be about SAP and how awesome the implementation was. So we're approaching things differently. We're looking at it as customers. What do you want to share with the market? What kind of innovative, interesting things are you doing in your industry? And let's face it, it's going to be covered with so many banner ads surrounding it that you're going to know it's from SAP. But let's get that great story to market. Let's focus on that first. So, the campaign. Folks have mentioned the campaign during this conference. The campaign is, at least today, it's a reality that we have to face. To me, if you start with the middle of this bullet, if you start with talking about your proof of concept, if you talk about solutions, you're creating a very small world for yourself, a very small audience who's ready to have that conversation. So let's broaden that conversation. Let's take it up a level. We look at personas. A lot of people are doing persona marketing right now. That's bigger, but it's not big enough. So Jim and I, we've come up with this concept of universal conversations. Universal conversations broaden the conversation, covers multiple personas, multiple line of businesses, different perspectives, timely content, and interesting stories. And that's where Story Hunters is focused. So don't come to us and ask for an implementation story. There's another team for that. Those are important too. Solution material is important. The proof of concept is important. It all has a place and a time. But we saw a gap in content. And so we're filling that gap via the Story Hunters program. So, again, I don't represent Serious Decisions, but we have dubbed the name pre-funnel content. For what it's worth, it serves to represent where our content lives. And our stakeholders are marketing managers, and they're used to living in the funnel world. So it's important to give them a perspective of how does this content relate to your traditional marketing funnel. So we're calling it the pre-funnel. And again, we have our bullseye here, and now with an example. So our proof of concept, we have some great solutions from SAP HR. I won't do a demo for you, I promise. But our personas would be, for example, the chief people officer and other line of business execs, right? So they're interested in this conversation potentially. But again, broaden the conversation. Let's talk about how we can unlock human potential. Let's cover topics around the new world of work. Let's talk about the global talent model and the future of leadership. Now, I hope you all agree that's interesting stuff. That's a conversation you want to have. And here we are. This was just a fun way to talk about the need for diversity of talent. I don't think Jim and I even realized this until we'd known each other a couple of months, and we were sitting down having a coffee, and I said, what's your background? He said, oh, well, I'm a writer. I'm an English major. And I said, oh, that's cool. I'm actually a psych major. I've always had a passion for technology, and I love marketing, and I always want to have a career where I can leverage my passion for both writing and technology.
I don't love that picture, though, of me. The older I get, the more I think I'm starting to look like Mr. Wilson, Dennis the Menace's next door neighbor. I don't like that.
So the point we want to make here, though, is that the traditional marketing profile of the MBA person with an analytical background, it's no longer a one-size-fits-all field. So we're looking for people who are storytellers. We're looking for journalists. We're looking for people with an interesting point of view on content. So just broaden your mind and see who else might be able to contribute to marketing. And it's been really interesting for me working with journalists. So we've brought in a couple freelance journalists to partner with me and Jim on the Story Hunters program. And it's just a very different view on the world. One thing I've noticed is that when we set out to interview a subject matter expert, those of us in marketing, we often go in already knowing the story that we intend to tell. And we're simply getting a subject matter expert to confirm, this is right, yes? Sign off on this, please, thank you. Whereas my journalist partners, they're very introspective, and they just go in exploratory mode and ask some great questions and end up down a completely different path that I never would have expected. So it's broadening my personal horizons as well. It's been a great experience.
And here's where I think there's an opportunity there too, because we need non-traditional marketing profiles for a big part of this kind of initiative. And let's face it, there's a lot of journalists out there looking for work. So I think there's a real opportunity there to both tell stories in new ways because you're taking a journalistic point of view and tap into some really excellent talent that we wouldn't have had access to probably 10 years ago when these guys were like columnists for the Philadelphia Inquirer, which is actually one of the profiles of one of the people we're working with on this.
Yep. It's been a great experience. So content strategy. This is a huge subject. We could have an entire presentation to talk about content strategy. So I just want to focus on one perspective on it. What we're trying to do here is deliver the content that your audience needs, the places they already go, on demand and on device. Think about Milton Millennial. He's not out there. He's not going to go find your white paper. He's not going to fill your contact us form out. It's just very unlikely to happen. You need to be where Milton is, right? You need to be on his mobile phone. You need to be on the blogs he reads, the magazines, the periodicals that he's already invested in, the columnists that he's following. So what's the net of this all? Why does this matter? Because you're building trust and loyalty for your brand. You become a trusted advisor. It's a great thing when it happens. Now, of course, I mentioned that I'm a technology geek, and I'm very passionate about this. So anytime I approach a project, especially something new and interesting like this, I need to look at it from a systems perspective. So what technology are we going to involve? We already rolled out one program, which I'll show you an example of in just a minute. We have our North America event series coming up in just a few weeks. We have, 12 different events, different cities all throughout the US. And instead of having our usual solution-driven, industry-driven events, we decided to turn that events model on its head and focus on these universal conversations I mentioned earlier. So instead of a cloud event, we are having an event about insight-driven innovation. And we're talking about things like customer centricity. Great topics, very today. But when we set about promoting these events, we realized there was a huge gap in our content. So what to do? The events were 8 weeks out. We needed content. So I started to look around for options, and I discovered this great content curation platform. Quick plug for Publish This. Hi, Matt. So we engaged with Publish This, and we set about building a very cool events microsite where we could leverage some of our existing content, but really build on that by developing content in real time, publishing it on our business innovation blog, and then also mixing in some external content. We have some really interesting thought leaders, and I'm sorry if this sounds like a commercial, but there's a point here. Some really interesting external thought leaders coming to keynote at our speech. So you may know the names Don Tapscott, Nate Silver, Don Wagner. A lot of them are publishers in their own right. So via the content curation platform, we were able to bring in, curate, if you will, some of their own content into our events site. And that site changes every day. As new stories are published, it comes into our site automatically. So it's great. The future is I want to connect this great content with our marketing automation system. So we can drive those leads all the way through the buyer cycle, starting with this great new content that we're coming up with via Story Hunters. We'd like to build an account-based marketing program using this model. Just think, we can deliver personalized content to our top accounts. Every marketing manager can be a blogger, can be a storyteller via this model. So here are some examples. The bottom of the slide is a screenshot of the event site that I just mentioned. So you see that we've brought in some articles from Forbes, from Time. We have a live Twitter feed going there. And then I have a couple other examples I really like.
Red Bull is a good example. They call themselves a media company that happens to sell energy drinks. Think about that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Red Bull, it's really interesting what they've done. They make movies. They just do incredible things with their media company. And it just so happens they also sell these great energy drinks. The other one in the corner there is Intel IQ has a webzine. It's pretty interesting looking. It's very dynamic, lots of great content. Definitely, get out there and check it out if you have a chance. So, back to Story Hunters. Where we are today. We have a long journey ahead. As I said earlier, this isn't going to be easy. It's new. A lot of people have expressed discomfort because it's different. People are in their comfort zone talking about themselves. In this case, it's a company. They want to talk about products, they want to talk about services, and when they don't get those things in the conversation, they feel they've failed. And we have to change that mindset. So again, it's a marathon, not a race. We just need to keep plugging at it, and the response to Story Hunters has been generally really positive. Once folks understand this opportunity, I've actually pitched it to folks in sales, and they've leveraged it as a pipeline accelerator to get deals moving faster. Because this doesn't need to be post-win or post-go-live. This is a platform for our customers' thought leadership. So as Jim said earlier, we allow our customers to have their own voice on our publishing platforms. That's exciting. Customers want that. So just very cool stuff that's happening.
It also helps you get to volume quickly in terms of content, right? Nobody ever has enough content. And the traditional model would be, let me go to Aberdeen and pay them to write 3 white papers, right? And so I get a 20-page white paper 3 months from now that I can then do something with, right? Between setting up a network of, I call it the stringer network, so that would be internal and external sources. So it could be your internal thought leaders, it could be your partners, it could be your customers, right? If you set up that stringer network where they're feeding you story ideas, and you have some internal capacity to convert those story ideas into actual assets or content that you can then put into your existing channels, who, as I mentioned before, are always hungry for content. And the channels could be, it could be your PR team, it could be your bloggers, it could be your digital and social teams, right? Everybody needs content. And so by kind of brokering that relationship and bringing a little bit of capacity in the middle for converting that content into market-ready content, you can really unleash a huge, as well as doing third-party curated content, which the tools that are out there now that just weren't here a year ago are amazing. You put all that together, and now you almost have more content than you need. And it's like, in our case, what we've published, if you want to call it that, is probably 85–90% non-SAP content. And the beauty of it is, it's in the public domain, it's on YouTube, it's already out on blog sites and news sites, and all you need to do is pull it together and package it for the audience you're looking to have a conversation with. And as a marketer and as a former, I started my career in publishing, I'm pretty excited actually about how all this stuff is converging, as well as now, people read stuff in real time on their mobile devices. So you have to package it in a way where it's going to work, right? Short, quick, provocative chunks of content that people can consume in a multi-channel world. So I think this is where we need to push ourselves toward. We need to drag our people to. We need to push the discipline of marketing harder and faster in this direction. And I think we also need to keep that authenticity front and center and make sure that people understand if we want to engage with our customers and the markets that we target in this way, we need to kind of let down the shield and become peers, really, in those conversations. And that's a very different model, at least from where I've played the last, I won't say how many years. Let's say 20 years. So that's our pitch. You guys we have a little bit of time for questions, do we?
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes for questions. So, do we have any questions about the Office of Interesting? Probably need to stand up here before I cause.
Join us.
Cause all kinds of.
How are you measured?
Didn't I tell you that would be the first question?
It is a measurement audience.
I did. Last night, I'm like, they're going to ask us first thing, how are we measured, right?
I'm going to get it. I know you guys got it wrong to get it, so what's the approach?
Absolutely. So there are measurement devices, right? And our CMO talks about not measuring activity, which is easy to do, right? But measuring results and levels of engagement. So we actually have a team called the Business Management Office that has a lot of analytical tools. So they will look at social networks. They will look at pipeline activity. They've got a measure they call level of engagement. And so we can actually look at where we've started conversations with particular accounts and tie that into where they then showed up later in our pipeline. Now, can we say we made that happen? Not necessarily, right? But there's no, and it's rare to be able to say, I did this one marketing tactic and we got this deal, right? I mean, success has many parents. But there are analytical tools now that let you make a fair connection between activity that you've got in the digital world and social worlds and content worlds, and following that buyer's journey into your actual pipeline.
I also want to add that SAP, as I said, is already publishing a lot of content, and we're looking to increase the quality and performance of that content, and that is measurable, absolutely. So, for example, I worked with our chief learning officer in drafting a blog, and it outperformed any other blog in recent months on our Forbes paid space, and it actually rated number 3 on Forbes.com overall last week. So that right there, that's where paid and earned credibility just come together nicely. So definitely measurable.
But we are fighting against, I call it the tyranny of the MGO, right? The marketing generated opportunity. That's how we've basically validated marketing's contribution to the business, right? That I can say, I did this and we got a pipeline opportunity. We can still do that, but I think we need to look at other measures of engagement beyond just, I did something and it showed up in the pipeline.
Thanks for your briefing.
Which is hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, yeah?
About repackaging content. What does that process look like?
Repackaging content. So
Yeah, other people's content as part of your blog feeds, etc.
So I think the way we do it is we try and take a point of view on something. So we want to talk, for example, about one of our universal conversations is about customer centricity. What does that mean to put the customer at the center of everything you do? How do you organize your, how you go to market to make sure that the customer is the central point of everything that you're doing? What are the new kinds of engagement and expectations that those customers have, right? So we want to have those conversations. And then what Celia and our team is able to do is go out and look at where are those conversations happening today? Who's got interesting points of view around it? And then bring that back into our own content feeds, either on our own sites, like the site she showed you that's in support of one of our event series, into blogs that we have, into, we frequently get amplified by other people who are doing the same thing, right? So if you collect an interesting package of content, it will get a reaction. You'll see it, what you've done, it will start showing up in different blogs and things like that. One of the other things we're looking at doing, and we've tested the waters a little bit, is, as Celia mentioned, creating, think about like a custom newsletter. I mean, that's an archaic kind of a framework to use, but for our top accounts, what we're doing is we're doing this content curation exercise on their behalf around topics that they care about, and ones that also align, not coincidentally, to where we may think we have selling opportunities within that account. So we can go to the CMO of one of our accounts and deliver a huge amount of information that he or she really cares about, right? And that's kind of a service that we're providing them. And I think that piece, particularly with the automated curation tools that are coming into play now, I mean, that can really give us the ability to personalize the conversations at the account level, which I think is groundbreaking.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim and Celia. So we'll thank them for a great presentation. So
Thank you.
appreciate it very much.
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. Yes, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Good
you.
job.
Good job, Jen.